So back to discussing your question. So when I talk to Elaine about this, I'm like, Elaine, in a peat bog, you're 100% organic matter, and the plants grow there, right? In pretty much any part of the world, you'll see a rock and you can see lichen growing on it. Well, that's a plant too. And it's a very, very unique plant because it's either when two bacteria come together with a fungi, or an algae and a bacteria and a fungi come together, or maybe it's two fungi and an algae, any one of those combinations. But these are three uniquely different organisms that have come together to form a relationship that as a result excretes this compound like a plant, but not quite, that allows them an area to survive and mine a fucking rock. Right? So there are extremes in nature on both cases. Personally speaking, when I was doing very, very high-end landscaping, if I did not have the right relationship of sand, silt, clay, and organic matter, I would create these areas that were sticky, gooey. The soil was just clumpy and gooey and slimy because they were watering to support the new tree that they just placed there. Were they overwatering? Yeah, a lot of times. That tends to be what landscapers do, is they just throw more water at it, thinking that's the right thing to do. But you'd create these anaerobic pockets. And, that was what I was trying to express to Elaine, is that, no, it's the same thing in cannabis. Like when I first got involved with cannabis, I looked at their potting mix and I said, let me guess. It goes anaerobic on the bottom and hydrophobic on the top. And they'd be like, what? I go, so the bottom of this pot is stinky when you harvest and throw it away, right? Well, yeah. Well, that's anaerobic. And on the top, when you water it, the water runs over the top and down the sides. That's called hydrophobic. It means very difficult to get the water to go in. And they're like, well, how did you know that? Because I'm a fucking soil engineer, motherfucker. This is what I do. So how do you fix that? You create an A horizon. You create an E horizon for the excess water when you do overwater, which you're going to overwater. So I'm going to put an E horizon in there. Can't fight. And then we'll put the A horizon on top. So when that excess water in the sand is needed because the top of the pot is drying out due to your fans, your lights, and your heat, now that can pull that water through the A horizon, because the A horizon acts like a pump. It acts like a heart and lungs. So it'll pull the water out of the E as the top dries off because of osmotic pressure. So the soil functions. And anybody that has actually made a horizontal system is like, oh my God, this is the easiest system I've ever had to deal with. And look at how healthy my plants are, right?
Yeah. That's a beautiful thing I noticed with the horizontal system and using it indoor. I see a lot of beds that have only potting mixes, and at the bottom, there's just this almost always this layer of like black mold looking stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And there's a lot of talk about how to get rid of that. And some people like talk about using sulfur to kill it and all this stuff. And it actually came up in conversation. The guys that I work with were like, so when that's going to happen, Tom, what are you going to do to deal with it? And I was like, well, theoretically, that's just not going to happen. That's a big reason for building horizontal beds. And what I've been noticing, 3 crops in, 0 of that nasty shit, and actually beautiful moss just growing around at the bottom of the bed. So I'd say that's a big plus right there. Would you say?
Yeah, well, that's the whole reason for sand, is it's a sand filter. So early on in my work, I started working at different aquaculture facilities to harvest the fish waste, because again, this is the foundation of my work, is using fish manure. There really is no such thing, because when a fish poops in the water, it just turns into what we call turbidity. So little floating pieces of organic matter. So I would create filters to collect those little particles out of the water, settle them. Then that was my fish manure. Okay. So bottom line is that if you have an E horizon, or sorry, back it up. So one of the reasons why I looked into using sand more in soil construction as I evolved was because of the sand filters that the aquaculture companies use. They use sand filters to remineralize the water. So what I mean by that, let me back it up again. A fish has two stomachs, one on the outside, the slime that you feel when you catch a fish. That's actually a stomach. That's biofilm. Those bacteria are pulling mineral out of the water. And inside the fish is another stomach to consume whatever it has consumed. So the reason they use the sand filters is to increase the mineral level in the water for the fish's outside stomach. If the fish's outside stomach is truly healthy, then that prevents the fish from getting diseases, parasites. If it does get a ding, the biofilm will heal right back over it, and then the fish, the scales and everything else can begin to heal very quickly. So that's why it's so important that these guys mineralize. What I learned was that they never changed the sand, and the sand had become anaerobic. So it was still providing minerals, but it had increased the level of facultative and anaerobic organisms in the water column, which slowed down the fish's ability to both mineralize for their outside stomach, and they didn't eat as much because they were living in this anaerobic soup with all these anaerobic biology. So I told the guy, hey, let's just clean out these sand filters. Let's put in some fresh sand. And let's get rid of the biofilter that feeds into that, because you're just creating the anaerobes in the biofilter because you never clean it. And you're putting that into the sand filter, which is feeding the sand filter's problem. So get rid of
it was getting dirty because there was organic matter building up in it.
Right, because the fish are pooping in the water.
Okay,
so,
sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so we got rid of the biofilters and we pumped the water directly into the sand filters. We changed the sand filters, and then I had him add a rotary screen drum filter to collect the solids out of the water. So he would take the water, throw it through the rotary screen drum filter, and then put that water back into the tank. It's called recirculating aquaculture. And then now that the sand filter was clean and the biofilter wasn't feeding anaerobes to the sand filter worked great. And he no longer had to burp them. And there's all these other complications with using sand filters. But that gave me the concept of, oh, I could create sand filters that prevent organic matter from penetrating them. Instead of pushing the organic matter through them, as long as I just allow them to function as a sand filter and not as an organic matter collector, then now I've got the perfect system. And another place to verify that, or I verified that in my own mind, was golf courses. So golf courses often have groundwater issues. So whoever's been out on a golf course knows certain times of the year you walk and your feet are squishy. You can just see the water bubbling up as you walk across it. So the way they used to handle that was by digging a trench, putting a perforated tube in it, wrapping it with filter fabric, and then burying that pipe with the assumption that because the pipe is hollow, it would allow that moisture to get in. Well, they work great for a year or two, but then what happens is squirrels climb up in there and build a nest that plugs the tube up, and the outside filter fabric gets caked with the organic fines, and now the water can't get into that pipe. So what they learned, the old guys, the smart ones, was fuck that. We're not using pipe and filters.